Good morning, Dan and Amy. Well, Donald Trump was in Cincinnati yesterday for a thank you rally, and
there's more cities to come next week.
yeah, and
But I don't think you should tell people this.
he was in full showman
It's a secret.
Trump, and he leaked out something he wasn't
Secret.
supposed to in front of media and thousands of people. His Secretary of Defense nomination.
Don't let it outside, right? And of course, the press is very honest. They'll never let this go. Even though it's all live, they got about 7 stations live. We are going to appoint Mad Dog Mattis as our Secretary of Defense. But we're not announcing it till Monday, so don't tell anybody. Mad Dog. He's great. He is great.
You better say Mad Dog is great. Otherwise, you're going to get your tail kicked.
Donald Trump was in his element last night. So good to see him back.
And by all appearances and all reviews, General Mattis is in his element, or will be in his element, Secretary of Defense running the Pentagon. This is somebody who is a decorated, really storied general, 4 decades in the Marine Corps. For more on Mattis and national security policy, we're pleased to be joined by another decorated veteran. He's retired U.S. Army Major General Paul Vallely. He's the chairman for the Center for Security Policy, and he's the co-author of the book Endgame, The Blueprint for Victory in the War on Terror. General Vallely, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It's actually Vallely.
Oh, Vallely. Excuse me. I'm sorry.
Vallely. That's
Vallely.
Okay. No problem. Happy to be with you this morning.
So, General Vallely, your assessment of General Mattis, both as a soldier as well as the Secretary of Defense-elect, effectively.
Well, about 200 of us met about 2 months ago with President-elect Trump back in Washington, D.C., and it was called the Warriors Meeting for Trump. But at that time, we were able to discuss a number of candidates who could go in and accomplish really 5 major things right away in the military. And General Mattis was one of those candidates, Colonel Allen West, another, and one of my favorites would have been General Jerry Boykin. So I'm very happy to see General Mattis, Mad Dog. I met him in Iraq several years ago when he was there, and very impressive. And he is a mad dog when it comes to victory in defeating the enemy, and that's a Pat Metz type of approach to war. And that's why you're going to see a whole change in attitude in the Pentagon with 5 major things that are going to happen fairly quickly.
And what are the 5 major things that are going to happen fairly quickly?
Well, the first is a whole change of attitude in the military and get away from the social engineering in our armed forces. The second is to identify the enemies of America, such as ISIS, radical Islam, and identify the enemy. The third is to get our programs back on track to give the soldiers and sailors and Marines the equipment they need to do the job. As you probably have read, there's been a tremendous shortage of spare parts now for our aircraft and for other kinds of vehicles in the Marines and the Army. And so that's very important to build that back up again. And we're going to produce, finally, just those kinds of weapons and equipment the military needs to fight today's and tomorrow's war, rather than the civilian contractors determine all these big contracts and trying to sell the government this and that. That's going to go away. We're going to have a more streamlined Pentagon. So with that in mind, Joe Mattis will pick very good people in the Pentagon to work for him. And I, as one with 32 years experience and combat experience in the infantry, know that he's the kind of officer that we need, now a civilian, to lead our Defense Department.
So when you talk about military preparedness, and that was a topic that Donald Trump gave a pretty detailed policy speech on during the course of the campaign, does that necessarily include then walking back the sequester and providing Congress and the president and the Secretary of Defense with the latitude to make those spending decisions that produce the preparedness we need for our 21st century threats?
Yeah, that's right, and that's a vision. Great leaders, when you study history, have a vision, and the vision about the military is to make sure that we identify the threats. This is the way we used to do it. What are the threats to the United States? Second, then what are the forces we need to counter those threats? And then the third, how do we fund those threats? And so that's the process that has to be done, rather than just throwing money out there to clearly identify the threats and the forces we need to have. So that whole new approach now, and with the Senate and with the Congress, who raises the money for the military, that we won't have these problems like a sequester anymore.
I want to go back to something you said about reversing the social engineering.
Right.
Can be specific about that? The President Obama just recently said, yeah, we should force women to register for the draft. That's a continuation of policy in that direction. We've got a military. There have been many instances where the military has been sort of hostile to religious freedom, religious expression, but particularly Christian religious expression. We've got the Chelsea Manning case, and financing elective gender reassignment surgeries, and all of these matters that are just reflective of what's going on in our culture writ large. I don't know if the military can be insulated from them or not, but what is your kind of posture on that, and what do you think General Mattis's will be?
Well, again, the focus is going to be on a prepared force that's ready, and we're not going to get hung up on all these social issues that are and use the military as a social engineering environment. I mean, we want to do that in the states and in the private sector and all that. That's fine. But the primary mission of our military is to protect and secure the United States and fight its wars to achieve victory. For example, many of us, and I've talked to a lot of the women, most recently 2 months ago, Marine Gunny Sergeant, and she just told me flat out, women should not be in the front line infantry units. And so that's one of the things that we want to pull back, because there's over 50 different specialties and skills women can be in. Now, while at war, which we are, I'm all for the draft. I'm all for women signing up for the draft. I think that's good, just like they do in Israel. We get involved and have our society involved in our wars, whereas now we have less than 1% of our population involved in fighting our wars right now. And so if we're going to be at war and go to war, we have to have the country involved, and that means all men and women. I mean, you go back to World War II, even the Revolutionary War, and see all the great things that women did to support whatever combat service, combat support operations were necessary. And we have women now flying helicopters, flying jets off their aircraft carriers. That's fine. They do a great job of that. The only question has always been, should they be in that infantry type of unit in the foxhole, so to speak? And many of us, including a lot of women, say no. One of the reasons is the lack of really strong upper body strength, and that's been a big thing with the Marines. So the Marines, for one, have stood tall on that, trying to social engineer the combat units like that. So it's going to be a whole new vision, a whole new concept of how we fight lean and mean and win our wars.
Now back to the cabinet selections for Donald Trump. John Kelly, Marine Corps General, up for Homeland Security, possibly Secretary of State. Do you think there would be too many generals surrounding Donald Trump?
No, there won't. I mean, you've got General Flynn now, National Security. And you see, once you're retired as a general, you're a civilian just like you.
Yeah.
Okay?
Oh, yeah, we have so much in common.
I just have to be a retired general.
For 7 years, you have to be retired.
Is there such a thing as too many generals, right?
Well, there's Admiral Michael S. Rogers, Director of National Security Agency. And, of course, the left is saying that, he's got 3 billionaires with him and 3 generals with him.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. People that have done things. People have been there and done things, rather than these politicians who pontificate and get nothing done. So at least we know the generals, admirals are trained to get things done.
All right.
And you don't become a billionaire by sitting on your derriere. So I think it's great we get people that have experience and have done things in life.
Well, specific to the national security picks he made
Sure.
with the vacancy at Secretary of State to be filled in short order, what's your
Right.
assessment of the full complement of people from Mike Pompeo at CIA to General Mattis to Flynn to KT McFarland? Give us your overall perspective.
Well, I know all of those people. I think the selection so far is very good. It's a first-class team. I think probably he'll announce over the weekend or on Monday. I think it's probably going to go with John Bolton for Secretary of State. I don't know.
Ooh.
That's my gut feel.
Oh, man, that'd be great.
Yeah, and he would be terrific in that job. Pompeo is a West Point graduate like I am, very good in the Intelligence Committee, very capable individual. So that's a good appointment. And Katie McFarland, who I know from Fox News. I was with Fox News for 8 years, as you may remember.
Mm-hmm.
But she's very good in policy, and she'll be an assistant to General Flynn. So those are all good appointments. More to come. When we look at the Department of Homeland Security, I like Sheriff David Clark from Milwaukee.
Yeah.
He would be one of my favorites, or the FBI for David Clark, because he's a law enforcement officer. We don't need any more lawyers in the FBI, that's for sure.
Spoken like a true general. He is retired U.S. Army Major General Paul Vallely, chairman of the Center for Security Policy and co-author of the book Endgame, The Blueprint for Victory in the War on Terror. General, thanks so much for joining us, sharing your insights. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy. Use